we are now going to cut layer 2. So layer 2 is this dark brown layer, and I have it set up so that you can just print the cutting lines onto a sheet of dark paper, or you can actually measure them out. Or for the squares, you can use the square nesting dies from Stampin' Up. So this is the 1, 2, 3, 4th, 5th, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th largest square, and it will cut out layer 1, that dark brown, for the square portions. But we actually have to cut the tall rectangles because I couldn't find a die that fit that. And then I have enough squares and tall rectangles set up on my template that we can put layer 1 on the visible parts of the card, visible when we're looking at the card like this. And you're going to want to cut, if you want to cover the inside of the card, I didn't do it here, but if you, in my sample, but if you want to, you'll cut 4 of the tall triangles and you'll cut 10 of the squares. On layer 1, the squares and the widths of the rectangles are 1 and 13/16 inches. We can just set them up here and we can just line it up the way we need to and then cut. And we can just keep either cutting on the lines that I've made, or you can keep lining it up with 1 and 13/16. And that one ended up being a little bit big, so that could throw off everything else I do. So just keep that in mind as you're cutting. It's not going to be the end of the world though. And I could have cut this so that I saved more paper, but I wanted to show how you could just keep moving this sheet of paper. So if I'd cut this part off first, I would have saved some paper and I could use that for something else. But again, I just wanted to show how you could just keep moving the paper along to get your cut without having to do a bunch of new setups each time. Okay, this one I'm actually gonna cut that way because I don't want to waste that piece of paper. Okay, so 1 and 13/16 again. 1 and 13/16 this way. And you might be worried, well, I'm gonna end up with the lines that I printed on my paper. It's okay, you can just flip your paper over. Here I am holding it up to the base layer, and that will work out really well. This is a nice piece of scrap that we can use for something else. I'm kind of a paper hoarder. I set aside my scraps thinking, oh, I can do something really cool with this. And every paper crafter I know is the same way. So as I cut my squares, I'm going to put them aside over here. Another scrap that can be used for something. I'm going to cut out the rest of these squares. You can fast forward through the video if you want. I'm not offended. Watching me cut squares is kind of like watching paint dry. Now I'm going to cut those rectangles, And the rectangles measure 3 7/8. And so I'm lining up this edge at 3 7/8, but I can also use the lines on my paper as a guide. I'm setting the rectangles up here when I'm done. This is a small piece, but that's still usable. I often use those pieces for hinges or whatever on pop-up cards. And actually could be used on this card, so I'm going to set that aside. It can be used to attach that message. So we've got one hinge on each side. So we actually need 2 of those hinges, and as luck would have it, we have 2 of those hinges. So we're going to set those aside, and then we're going to set our scraps aside so that they're not in the way of our work, and then we're going to move on.